Hey, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page and follow us on iTunes and Spotify. I'm Metal Dave Glessner along with my co-host Jason McMaster. And today we are going to spend some time talking with Jason Kottwitz, aka Ginchy. Ginchy is a friend of ours for many years. He's a guitar player. He spent some time in a version of the Dead Boys. He spent some time playing with Sylvain Sylvain of the New York Dolls. Both of those bands, by the way, the Dead Boys were invited to play the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the building itself, because, as you may know, the Dead Boys are originally from Cleveland, Ohio, where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is located. And then Sylvain Sylvain, of course, recently departed, recently inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Ginchy has spent time touring the country, touring the world with both of those guys. They're both heroes of his as a punk rock guitar player. He was obviously thrilled to spend time in the van with both Cheetah Chrome and Sylvain Sylvain. Jason, I wanted to ask you real quick before we get into our segment with Jason. I got an email today from Maria Ferraro of Adrenaline PR, and I've been getting emails from her for years. She's a wonderful publicist, and she's handling one of your latest releases. We talked about this on a previous episode. Cassius King is a project you're involved in with Dan Lorenzo.
That's
from
correct.
from Hades.
Mm-hmm.
And
He's been in many bands, but yeah, Hades, and then after Hades, what was left over, some of the members, and he formed a band called Nonfiction, which still had Hades had Alan Tecchio, who replaced me in Watchtower, was also fronting Nonfiction, and then that went on and on and on, and then there were things happen, right?
yeah,
And I was joining the Toys. I called Alan. I go, you should replace me in Watchtower, dude, and da 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 da. So it's crazy that Alan replaced me in Watchtower, and I'm working with his old band, kind of thing. He's working with my old band. I'm working with his old band. So what are friends for?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's rock and roll, right?
Yeah, that's just the incest, right?
Well, you've sent me a couple tracks of the Cassius King stuff, and I really enjoyed it. But the thing that caught my eye on this press release that landed in my inbox today was, and I wasn't aware of this, you guys with Cassius King do a cover of Aerosmith's "Sight for Sore Eyes." Tell me how that came about. How was that song chosen? Because I'm a huge Aerosmith fan, so I just wanted
Mm-hmm.
to know the story behind that.
Me too. And our guest that we're having today and myself were also together in an Aerosmith tribute band called Aerosmith.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this is all tying together very well. Um, Dan Lorenzo has been in touch. Me and Alan Tecchio were pen pals in the '80s. He and Hades were fans of Watchtower, and I was kind of the liaison. I was the guy who wrote everybody back. I was answering fan, fan mail, tape trading, that kind of thing. That's now kind of a legendary thing you hear about now.
yeah.
Um, and I got this letter from these guys in New Jersey called Hades, and it had a T-shirt which I still have. This was probably 1986. I still have the shirt. Um,
And I bet it fits, doesn't it?
it's a little tight, but it does fit. The reason that it's not like a regular outing where I'm wearing that thing is because it's bright Kelly green.
Oh, okay.
It is green,
Not
so
not your go-to color.
it's a bit can be nightmarish. I look like I'm the Green Hornet or Arrow or one of those
The
Marvel
green
comic,
the Green
something.
Lantern.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
So no, yeah, it's that color of green. So
Yeah.
anyway, Dan sort of stayed in touch. uh, off and on, or we always just kind of well, we knew each other just through the Watchtower Hades connection, right? And so I guess probably in the mid 2000s he started, we both could find each other on the internet, right? So
Yeah.
he started sending me songs. And then even more recently, he said, "Hey, I got this little thing I'm doing, and it's me and a couple, Jimmy and Ron and da, and we're just doing Kiss and Aerosmith and Cheap Trick. I did Big Eyes. I did Back in the Saddle. I did Mr. Speed,
Oh, yeah.
Kiss song. Yeah, and it came out great, and it's a little heavier and dirtier because Dan tunes down,
Yeah.
and it's pretty heavy. And me, I'm a bit of a purist. I like to sort of nail the cover song. I like it to be legit. And it's okay if it's like a half step down or something, but I like the tones to be at least similar. I don't like it when you do new arrangements of that song, so it's as true as Dan would like it to be. So I do my damnedest to do a great job, and everybody knows that on a cover song.
Yeah.
So he's sending me some stuff, and I start to do it, and you know I'm not mad, but I ain't getting paid for it. A lot of stuff like that I get paid for. But me and Dan go way back. I'm not expecting much. And so anyway, um, he's like in 2009 or seven, even he starts sending me original things right before this, or just over the past few years, sending me cover songs to do. So the original thing has been kind of an off and on thing. Hey, I got these songs. I don't have a singer. You want to? And I would dabble with it a little bit. I'm a busy guy, so Anyway, uh, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, he starts sending me cover songs every once in a while. So here we are, 2 years, 2.5 years later, and I've done the covers I mentioned, and Cypher Sore Eyes was one of the more recent. And he was releasing that. Like, I've got a CD with Mr. Speed, Big Eyes, that, and then some other maybe original stuff I think Cassius King was doing where he's using a different singer. And so, just little compilations that he's selling on his website and stuff like that. So the Cypher Sore Eyes thing is actually a for fun thing for Cassius King, which didn't at the time didn't really seem like a serious band.
Yeah.
I don't know why I mean, he's not we're not trying to like be rock stars or anything, right? We're just making music because it's what we do, right?
Yeah.
So he loves all of the things that we talk about, AC/DC and Kiss and Aerosmith and Cheap Trick. And so Led Zeppelin, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how that came about. And he's sends me the tracks, and I record them 2 feet from where I'm sitting right now. I
Yeah.
record all my vocals here in my studio, and the the original material started coming in, 2 and 3 at a time, and I started throwing stuff down on it, just stuff I had, lyric ideas I had laying around I wasn't using anywhere else. And next thing you know, he calls me, goes, "Hey, this, I got us a record deal. What do you think? You think we can do?" So I said, "Why not? Someone wants to put out a record that you and I can write and just put together with." Because he's got a situation where him and his band can record the material like easy and fairly cheap,
Yeah.
and send me a rough mix, whether it's finished, air quotes, right, finished or not, and
Yeah.
I can throw vocals on it and send it back. They get a bass on it, and it's mixed, and it started to sound really kick ass. And
Yeah.
he writes these dark, kind of doomy things. Anyway, so we have a record coming out. Um, I've got artwork being done right now by a somewhat famous or at least infamous artist that I don't want to reveal at the moment. That will come in time. But it's everybody has seen this artist's uh, work. Everyone has because he's done uh, uh, one cover and a T-shirt for one of the biggest heavy metal bands, if not the biggest heavy metal band in the world, that
Ah,
we talk about a lot on here. So those
nice.
are all the hints I can tell you.
All right, all right.
Until it's done, I've seen a rough, but it's not necessarily
Yeah.
done. So anyway, mum is kind of the word on that till it's not. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. There's a 7-inch that's only 55 numbered, and I actually have back here numbers 1 through 4. The guy at the label sent me the first 4 off the lathe, and I'm like, wow. I don't know what So I've got some friends that I've kind of let the cat out of the bag, so they're already begging me for them. But they're selling for like $20 because they're numbered and they're low. Only 55 of them.
Limited, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
So,
I wanted to bring that up today because I got the email from Maria and from
did
a
you
drum.
press play?
The only thing it didn't offer a link to the Aerosmith song.
Oh, but the link is with the player is everywhere. It's on Blabbermouth. It's everywhere.
Yeah,
So people can go listen to it. Cash is king.
Cash is King. So the
Yeah,
teaser is the 7-inch, and then there's an album dropping later in the year. Is that correct?
correct. That's correct.
There you
The
go. Cash is
The
King.
album is called Field Trip. The single that's out right now is called Traveler with the B-side Aerosmith Sight for Sore Eyes.
Awesome. Cash is King, people. Look for that. It's one of Jason's many new projects coming your way
I'm
soon.
I'm thanks for plugging that for me.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about our guest today.
Oh yeah, me too. We've known him for a long time. He's a great guy. He's accomplished a lot. Got to play with some of his heroes. I can't wait to start talking to him. So let's do it. Let's move into our conversation with Jason Kottwitz, aka Ginchy. Here he is, our special guest today, Jason Kottwitz, aka Ginchy. He's a good friend of ours from a number of years back, and most of you know him as the guitar player who spent some time in the revamped version of the Dead Boys. He's also played with Sylvain Sylvain from the New York Dolls. We're going to learn a lot about him, but I think we should first of all say thank you for joining us today. And how you doing, bud?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing wonderful.
Tell us a little bit about. I think we all want to know how did you get the Dead Boys gig, and let's jump into that, and we'll circle back to some other stuff after the fact. But most of the people listening might know you best as your time in the Dead Boys. So tell us a little bit about that.
It's kind of a long, drawn out story, but I'll try to make it quick.
We got time.
Couple Halloweens ago, I guess, maybe in 2013, 14, I was doing Halloween shows at Red 7, I think it was.
Club here in Austin.
Called me and asked me, hey, do you want to do a tribute gig for Halloween this year? I said, sure. Can I do the Dead Boys? Got a couple guys I knew together and did it. And come South by Southwest, I had a bunch of people calling me out of clear blue. Hey, do you want to do that Dead Boys thing again? And I was like, it was kind of only meant to be just a one-shot thing. But so I agreed to do it. And I knew Cheetah Chrome was going to be in town for South by Southwest. So Dave, I can't remember exactly how I got his number. I might have gotten it through Frank Meyer.
Yeah, that's right.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, that's right.
I cold called Cheetah and said, hey, I hear you're coming to town. How would you feel about jumping up with my Dead Boys tribute, which was called Flamethrower Love, and playing some gigs with us? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. He was totally into it. Well, he calls me back maybe a week later and he's like, hey, I've been watching some videos of your other band, the Bulimics, and you guys can really play. How would you feel about maybe a couple of you guys backing me up for my solo show at South by Southwest? Because he had just put out the Cheetah Chrome solo record through Plowboy Records.
Right.
So, of course, I agreed to play, and I got a couple guys, and when we put it together, and then he came up here, we started playing gigs, and we started playing more gigs, and then I started playing with his solo band that was actually touring, and that went on for some time. And then the 40th anniversary of the Dead Boys was happening, the 40th anniversary of the Young, Loud, and Snotty album. So he called Johnny Blitz, and they decided they were going to tour as the Dead Boys, and I was already there, kind of got that gig by default, I guess.
That is freaking awesome. The for you to just basically kind of have it's almost like the Tim Owens thing and Judas Priest. Hey, I got a Priest tribute band and this is fun and da 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 da. Next thing you know, you're hanging out with Glenn Tipton. It's the same thing. And then you're like touring and maybe recording and even writing.
It was crazy at first, because I mean, Dead Boys has always been one of my favorite bands. That's obviously why I did the tribute in the first place, because I was a huge fan. And I remember the first time I played with him, I had never even rehearsed with him or anything. He showed up at the Dead Boys tribute gig and was like, here I am, let's do this. And it was odd because I was actually playing his role in the tribute band and playing all his parts.
Did you have to switch that up anything so you guys weren't
I didn't think of that until we played the same lick for about 2 bars going into it. And then I was like, holy shit, dude's playing and he's standing right beside me. So then I went to rhythm guitar at that point, but
that's like Tommy Thayer and Ace Frehley, getting chummy on stage playing the same. Oh, you go.
It was kind of funny. I remember that first time. There are a couple licks on that first album where, it wasn't recorded that great, and it's kind of hard to hear some of the guitar leads and stuff. So there's a couple parts in there, I didn't know what he was doing. And that first gig, I remember looking over my shoulder and trying to see what he was playing on certain parts.
Again, I just want to say, I don't know if people realize the lore and legend of the Dead Boys, and it's super big deal, not only just to you that you're like, oh my God, I'm Ace Frehley and Kiss is what it's probably like a little bit. So,
yeah.
So when you think like that, and then for anyone who's not even, if you're a rock and roll fan, you should know about the Dead Boys.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone and their dog has been covering the, Sonic Reducer, and, it's kind of crazy.
I've always felt like, the Dead Boys never get mentioned in the same breath as the Ramones and the Clash and the Sex Pistols when the conversation turns to punk rock. But for me, that album, Young, Loud, and Snotty, is probably the best of the bunch. And I'm a huge Ramones fan, but that album is just amazing. And for you to be able to play with them, play with Cheetah, who I know is a, like you said, you had a tribute band. That was sort of how you made the connection with Cheetah, as far as having him come up and guest. He was kind enough to come up and do a guest appearance on your gig, and that sort of led to the friendship. But I think that's really cool that he's one of your guitar heroes, and you got to play with him and do some tours and do the van trips and all that stuff, which I'm sure just had all kinds of great stories rattling around in those 4 walls. So can you elaborate a little bit on the touring that you did and some of the stories that he told as you were tripping across the country in the back of a van?
Oh man, I don't even know where to start with that, because all the stories are every bit as crazy as you would think they are. some of my favorite stories to talk about with Cheetah. A lot of people don't know this, but Cheetah and Johnny Thunders were roommates in New York for a while.
Oh wow.
You can only imagine the chaos that ensued with those two. I mean, just stuff that's not even believable, you know? And the funny thing about it later is, you know, I started playing with Sylvain from the Dolls a little bit later, and he was able to corroborate all these stories that Cheetah was telling me. And to hear his version of them was even better because there was always more to the story than was let on, you know?
So yeah, Sylvain was the fact checker, and you were like checking him off as he was. Wow, that one was real. Oh, this one was real too. Whoa.
Yeah.
Not that Cheetah was, you know, fibbing or pulling your leg, but yeah, that's pretty awesome.
I mean, just, you know, there's so many random stories they would tell. You know, like Johnny Blitz telling me that Rob Zombie used to be his pizza delivery guy in New York in the late 70s. Just weirdo stuff like that, you know, off the wall stuff. Gigi Allen used to come over and hang out with Johnny and Cheetah before Gigi developed his shtick. And back then he was just a nice rock and roll dude, you know, and he was the mellower of the three, which is terrifying.
Right.
Yeah.
If people listening or watching Talk Louder right now, if they know anything about Gigi Allen, to think that Gigi is the more mellow of the three, that's kind of a big deal. That's a mountain.
That's right.
There's the famous Saturday Night Live story. You know, Fear was really the first punk band to play on Saturday Night Live as a result of John Belushi getting them that gig.
Yeah.
Now, John Belushi was also Johnny Blitz, the drummer for the Dead Boys. I think he was a neighbor, and Belushi and Johnny Blitz were really tight. These are the stories as they have been told to me.
Sure. Do you know where, by the way, do you know where Belushi is actually from? Was he a New York native?
I don't know if he was native to New York or not. All I know is, you know, these stories, he was living at the time.
He could have been a Midwestern kid and got into his, you know, comedy and acting and stuff like that. Just, you know, and next thing you know, he's doing skits and plays in New York for theaters and, you know, then SNL. But I don't know. But not to just turn it into the John Belushi story, but I watched a police documentary, and some of the police guys were, you know, I don't know, in the Bahamas or in Tahiti or somewhere, and they're hanging out at this bar, and they walk up to the bar, and they sat down, and they're next to John Belushi, and they're hanging out with John Belushi for like weeks.
Well,
and you know what that probably turns into one of Cheetah's stories.
Absolutely.
What was the Dead Boys Saturday Night Live story?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Sorry.
Well, the Dead Boys were supposed to play Saturday Night Live, like they were scheduled and everything.
Oh, okay.
And there's a couple different versions that I heard of why they didn't play. At the time, they went to have a meeting with Lorne Michaels, I guess, and they were with the SNL production team. And Cheetah once told me that the production team wouldn't let them bring their Marshall stacks in because at that time, you know, they were scaled down and the Marshall stacks would be a little bit too much for the stage. And because of that, the Dead Boys pulled out of the deal. But the other story I heard from other members of the Dead Boys, they say that Lorne Michaels canceled them at the last minute because they heard that Stiv Bators was going to drop Trow on live TV.
That sounds believable.
Which is totally believable if you've ever heard any of the Stiv Bator stories.
Yeah. Well, and just to save some face and have it, you know, be a pain in the ass and then just, you know, let it happen. It would have been he probably did the right thing from a production standpoint and things like that. But, you know, the legend of Fear, and then a camera getting knocked over and all that stuff playing on there. That's going to live on forever and ever and ever for everyone who knows that story. So could have been the same thing, but Lauren probably didn't want it to happen again. Kind of,
Sure.
yeah.
Cheetah told me his story one time. I had asked him if I'm like, did you ever miss any Dead Boys gigs? Were there any periods where you missed an extended period of time or had anyone fill in for you? This is, of course, before he left the band. And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, one time I broke my wrist and I missed a tour. And, I was kind of puzzled. I'm like, well, how do you break your wrist? And he broke it at Keith Richards' birthday party. And he was racing Richard Lloyd on roller skates, apparently.
You can't make that up. I don't.
No.
I mean, you can, but how would you put those players together?
But
roller skates.
He comes out and says that like it's no big deal, like just a minor detail. Yeah, I'm sitting over there with my jaw on the floor, like, are you kidding?
Yeah, he's not pulling out slivers of piece of paper. What kind of shit can I make up right now?
No.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
So you guys,
amazing.
How long? I know you started off. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you basically started off playing with Cheetah while he was kind of promoting his solo career, and then that sort of segued into the Dead Boys. Am I right?
Yeah. We started off. We did the tribute thing at South by Southwest, and then we played at his label showcase and played some solo gigs for South by. And then he calls me and's like, you interested in doing some touring behind this record? So I said yes. And he didn't have any management or booking or anything at the time. So I was booking all the shows and everything, putting them together. And I did all of those up until the Dead Boys gig started, at which time he picked up a manager and, we went from there.
So how many years total would you say you spent with Cheetah, both as his backing him as a solo artist and then as
maybe 6 years or so?
Yeah. Okay. I knew it was a pretty good
run
length of time. And one of the things you did during that time period was record this, which is, I'm probably getting a glare on, I'm holding up
I can see it.
Still snotty after 40 years. It's basically a reissue or a re-recording, I should say. Let me get that correct. It's a re-recording of the Dead Boys classic album Young, Loud, and Snotty, featuring you and the revamped version of the band. Tell me a little bit about the making of that record, and I know that Cheetah was hoping to maybe capture the album as he intended it to be when it came out in 1976. Was there some speculation that the album that was released to the public was basically a demo, and that he was trying to basically put out what he was envisioning the album to sound like in 76 or 77, whenever the original came out. So tell me about the making of this re-recorded version of the album.
Well, it came as a surprise to me at the time. And I was asked how I felt about it. And I was pretty much dead set against it. I didn't want to do it at all.
Why is that?
It'd be the same scenario if Steven Tyler came up to me and asked me if I wanted to re-record Rocks.
Yeah.
It's like, you just don't mess with the Holy Grail, I guess I don't know exactly why it was redone. Like I said, I've heard lots of different reasons why. I suspect it's because of the deal with Warner Brothers. I feel like possibly it was a business thing.
Do you think it was a spite thing? That's a business thing, spite. Oh, Warner Brothers are not paying us, so fuck them. We're going to re-record all the songs. Is it like that?
I suspect there might have been some of that in there. Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah.
I can't say for sure. I'm not the guy behind the curtain, but
right. Well, I wouldn't.
If I had to guess, I would say yes.
I'm not trying to throw the Sharon Osbourne on you, like, "Hi, it's Bob Daisley. You never sent my check," and Sharon, well, fuck you. I'm not going to ever pay you. I'm just going to get Mike Borden and Robert Trio to. Here's $1 million. You guys go record over Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake on Crazy Train. No big deal.
Yeah.
And
So
that's a sin.
So forget about the motivation behind the album, whatever it may have been, the re-recording of it. Talk to us about.
I'm glad that you did it. By the way, I'm glad y'all did that.
No, I am too, and this is what I'm getting at. I want to know, Ginchy, what it was like for you to go into a studio and re-record those songs. You're obviously a lifelong fan of the Dead Boys. You obviously have the utmost respect for the original album. What was it like going in and recutting these tracks and re-recording with with a new band, basically?
Well, first of all, let me say, because we haven't talked about this, I'm as big of a Jimmy Zero fan as I am a Cheetah Chrome fan, and I was playing all Jimmy Zero's parts, so that was a real thrill for me. I think Jimmy Zero as a songwriter is just incredible. I don't think he's ever done anything that I didn't like.
Yeah.
Just, his songwriting is amazing. I don't know. We went up to Nashville, and I don't remember the name of the studio. It was on Music Row. It was right beside Blackbird Studios up there, which is a big one. I had a buddy that works at Blackbird, actually, and they have a huge vintage collection in there. Every amp you would ever need. So I called Tom up and I'm like, hey, I need an amp for the session. He's like, I'll just bring one by next door and drop it off. Well, when I got to the studio, I had like a 1967 Marshall JTM 45 that Buddy Guy played on a bunch of albums in the 70s.
Wow.
So just walking in and seeing that, I was tickled. Yeah, and then we went in and just pretty much played the songs live. I mean, there weren't a lot of takes done at all. It was kind of just.
Yeah, you guys were already rehearsed up on.
I mean, I've been playing those songs with him since I've been playing with him, because playing Dead Boys songs in his live set anyway. So
yeah, no pre-production rehearsals whatsoever. Just walk in.
No. It was pretty much, for me, it was pretty much one take everything.
Now, for me,
overdubs just.
For me, there's a funny story behind the album cover. It might not be as funny for you, Ginchy, but again, let's take a look at that album cover and tell us about the photo shoot. And I'll let you tell the story, but go ahead.
I don't remember much of it. All I know is I was completely unprepared. I don't know if I wasn't at the meeting or I didn't get the memo or whatever it was, but I was doing a session, finishing up, and they're like, all right, guys, come on, let's go. I'm like, go where? And they're like, oh, we're just going to go shoot some pictures. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I go, and this guy's taking pictures of us. I had no idea it was for the album cover at all. Like, I didn't do anything. It was like I just got done mowing my yard and went to a photo shoot. You know what I mean? Like, that's
perfect, dude. You're a Dead Boy.
So completely unprepared for that.
I love that story. And the funny thing is, for me, I look at that photo and I'm going, you look fine, man. I mean, the whole band has a look and you guys look like a gang, and it worked out fine. If you would have never told me that story, I would have never known. So,
well, here's the deal is with me is I don't, I play with a lot of guys who get dolled up for the show and all this, the hair, the make, whatever. I don't do that usually. I mean, for the most part, what I wear on stage is literally what I mow the yard in. It's, what I wear when I'm walking around my house. It's like I have a uniform, black pants, black t-shirt, ball cap sometimes, maybe a different hat. I wore this hat today because Sylvain gave me this hat.
I was going to ask about that.
And I've never really had the chance to I've never worn any of the hats that he gave me out or anything. So I was like, hey, I'll wear one of his hats today.
Well, for what it's worth, I thought the album cover looked fine, and I would have never known you weren't prepared for it because you look fine, you look great, the whole band looks great. I just thought that was a funny story.
You should have seen the look on my face when I actually saw the CD.
Yeah,
I was like, "Are you kidding me? That was our picture? Oh my god!" I had no idea when they handed me the CD the first time. I looked at it, and I was just like, "You got to be kidding me!" I had no idea.
A lot of people don't realize how often that actually happens in the business. It really does happen a lot. Like, you don't know what photo they're going to use.
Right.
You know, you just show up and do a thing, and like after a while, I'm sure that no one really knows what they're. Oh, another photo shoot. Okay, well, just put some black shirt and black pants on. You don't know. You know. Anyway, it's quite common. Let's switch gears a little bit. You know, you've mentioned Sylvain and you know, from the New York Dolls. And how many shows did you do with him? And did you do any recording?
No, I never did any recording with Sylvain. Okay. A lot. I mean, I have a couple of songs that I wrote with him.
That's awesome.
He would come to my house and stay for like a month.
Legendary.
You know, so he would be over here, and oh my, it was so fun to have him in my house. It was so incredible. But he would come down, and we did a month-long residency in Austin one time where we played every week, and in between those shows we were hitting like, you know, Dallas or New Orleans, and we're doing all these shows. In total, I don't know, I think I probably played like 50 or 60 shows with him.
That's pretty good, man.
But you made it to Japan with him, right?
Yeah.
How was that?
That was incredible. That was one of my favorite musical moments of my life ever. Getting to play with that guy, to me, was like just.
Yeah, that's it. It's up there with it's rivaling your years with the Dead Boys.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, you've done some pretty sick stuff.
It was a wicked gig for me because I'm a huge Johnny Thunders fan, and to get to play with the guy who's his left-hand man,
yeah,
and play all Johnny's parts and things it was mind-blowing to me. And his stories are, oh my, you know, they just never ended.
Well, tell us how you met him and ended up in, you know, as his sort of helper, you know.
Okay, so Cheetah and Sylvain did a project together called Batusis, and I think that was what, Dave, in 2009, 2010?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
In that time frame. But Sylvain was living in Nashville, and of course him and Cheetah are friends, and Sylvain wasn't really doing anything at the time. And I don't know if, you know, he just got jealous seeing Cheetah going out and playing shows or what. But one day I get a cold call, essentially, from a number I didn't recognize. And I picked it up, and it's like, "Hi, is Jason there?" "Yeah, this is me." He's like, "This is Sylvain from the New York Dolls." I just started laughing. I thought it was a joke. Like I didn't take it seriously. Like it was a cold call. I didn't expect it. I didn't know it was coming or anything.
Well, who, you know, who else? What do you have to compare that to?
Yeah. Well,
oh, you know what? He called me too. Bullshit.
Yeah. And well, when I laughed and I'm not hearing any laughter on the other end of the phone, I'm like, "Oh yeah, cool, where'd you get my number?" And it's like, "Oh, I got it from Cheetah."
Right.
It's like, you know, I'm looking to play some gigs, and Cheetah's really happy with you in the band. Is there any chance you guys would be willing to back me up as well?
Wow.
And it was like, I was a little surprised. I'm thinking, well, you live in Nashville. Aren't there 18 million guys there you can use? But I'm not going to turn it down. Of course, we'll play with you, you know, of course.
Yeah. At that point, you might be shooting yourself in the foot going, "Nah, you got plenty of guys in Nashville, click. That's not what you're going to do."
No, of course not. Of course not. I'm a huge Dolls fan, Dolls fan. So that was like another dream come true for me. And at that point, I felt like I was on top of the world. I'm like, who's calling next? This is going real well.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for
Hello, Jason. This is
Angus
Gene
Young to
Simmons.
call or something and be like, hey, we got some gigs and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say that I remember when Ginchy got the gig with Sylvain, and this was all sort of connect the dots because, as he said earlier, uh, I in a roundabout sort of way, I kind of connected Ginchy with Cheetah through Frank Meyer from the band Streetwalking Cheetahs, and then from that led to the Sylvain Sylvain thing. And Ginchy's basically my neighbor. He lives right around the corner from me here in South Austin. And I remember going over to his house one day, and Cheetah was over there, and I was like, I'm a big Dead Boys fan, so it was just a trip for me to walk into my buddy's house, and there's Cheetah Chrome sitting there at the dining room table, and they're working on some songs or whatnot. And then the other thing was Ginchy invited me out to a rehearsal when he was, rehearsing with Sylvain Sylvain, and I went down to the rehearsal space, and it's this tiny little room, music lab on St. Elmo's in South Austin, and it was such a treat for me to just sit in there and watch these guys run through these New York Dolls classic songs in a room that's not much bigger than this room that I'm sitting in right now. The volume is excruciating, but I mean, Sylvain is sitting right there or standing right there playing, and they're running through these tracks, and I'm just sitting there going, I can't believe I'm witnessing this. And then in between all the songs, and sometimes even during the songs, Sylvain is like, you know, uh he's this character, man, and he was talking in between the songs, and everything he said was hilarious, and even his body language during the songs when he wants somebody to speed up or or whatever, he's just all full of body language, and it was just a trip to watch it right in front of my face in a tiny little room. I was just thrilled to be there, and thank you, Ginchy, for that time.
That guy is so amazing. People ask me how I felt about what's the difference between playing with Cheetah or Sylvain or whatever, and I didn't really make any comparisons there, but playing with Sylvain was fascinating to me because he directs traffic like James Brown or Prince.
That's what I was trying to say.
The first thing I had to learn
I call it directing. He's directing you. Yeah.
Yeah. The first thing I had to do when I played with him is he had signals. He had a playbook, and you have to learn those signals. And that's how he directed on stage. If he's pointing up or pointing down or looking at you and winking at you, everything he's doing is a signal to somebody on stage to do something. And that frees him up to play guitar, to sing, to dance, to tell a story, or whatever he wants to do when he wants to do it.
Yeah, that's James Brown for sure, right there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the versions of the New York Dolls songs that we played were always very loose. We'd get through about a chorus or two, maybe, and he'd start throwing his signs, and we'd start shifting gears and going all over the place.
Yeah.
We may not even end that song with the same song.
Yeah.
Start singing something else in the middle of it, and he wants to transition from one to the next. And so I really had to be on my toes for that gig. I had to be paying attention.
Yeah.
Because he was all over the place.
That reminds me of stories I've heard about Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
We're going to do this. Now we're going to do this. We're going to do this. He's without even saying that. And they're just going through all these, or he'll start playing something and then like his whole band's going, oh shit, give me that bass. Oh shit, give me that other tuning. With it, he's not even said there's no set list. He's just starting a song and you better be ready.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that your situation was like that. That's a little bit.
Well, you never knew how it was going to go from one night to the next. I mean, there was a lot of loose jamming going on in that stuff. Mm-hmm. And as far as a guitar player, we went out to dinner one night at Lucy's Fried Chicken. And afterwards we were in the car getting ready to pull out. And I remember he looks at me and he goes, "You're a big Johnny Thunders fan, aren't you?" And maybe it's because I have Johnny Thunders guitar tattooed on my arm that drew his attention. He's like, "You're a big Thunders fan, yeah?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah." He's like, Yeah, I taught Johnny how to play guitar.
Wow.
That was just like, staking his territory out, kind of.
Yeah.
That was the only time I felt like he was, being territorial of any sort. But he had amazing, those early. I could ask him anything about the dolls that I wanted because he was always available and always around. He's hanging around my house. I mean, I still in my house. I have some of Sylvain's amps here. I have his clothes. I have one of his guitars. He loved to come over to my house and barter with me. He would always show up with a bunch of stuff. We'd just be hanging out, and he'd walk up to me one day and be like, "Hey, I really like that flying V you got over there. Maybe we can work out a deal on that." And I'd be like, "Well, what do you got?" He'd run upstairs and come back down with some clothes, and I don't know. For the most part, when he was here, he sat in his room and made clothes for his next gig. Because he made the New York Dolls clothes back then.
Wow.
Yeah.
He was doing Truth and Soul. He was making the hats and making all their clothes.
Wow, that's crazy.
He really loved to tell me the story about him making bell bottoms for Janis Joplin in the late 60s.
Unreal. Is it a known fact that he was basically a seamster?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
People know the Truth and Soul.
Honestly, I never knew that.
Well, he, Sylvain was famous for his hats, and Ginchy's wearing one right there.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to him for a bit when he was here in Austin, and asking him about the hats, and he was telling me about some of the process in making them and buying the materials and this and that, and he was obviously very into it. And I always thought the hats were really cool. And he was selling them for, I don't know, I think they were going for about $200 a pop, and which may sound like a lot, but I mean, look how cool that hat is. And this is being stitched together by one of the guys from the New York Dolls. It's being put together with love and care.
Yeah, and it's a rock and roll thing. It's a rock and roll thing. That hat is similar to, I've seen Prince and Sly and the Family Stone wear those. I've seen Ron Wood wear stuff like that. I mean, it's a rock and roll. That's a rock and roller's hat.
Yeah, the
There's
coolest.
something to the way that hat looks, and it's a symbol. To me, stuff like that reminds me of like what the the skull and crossbones is to rock and roll, or the war pig, the Motorhead emblem, and just things like that. That's right in there. That
Yeah.
means something like that.
Yeah.
So when you think of the dolls, and then you start talking about Sylvain, that it seems like a natural procession. So now that I know that he was stitching and making all that stuff, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And he was making stuff in your house.
He brought his sewing machine with him.
Of course he did.
I put a table out for him in the guest bedroom, and he set his sewing machine up, and he would sit up there, and he would know that we would have a gig, like later on that week. So he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna make a new shirt for this gig," and he'd sit up there, and he was really into old radios. He would go to the pawn shops around here, or go to these secondhand stores, and he'd come back with like a radio from like the 1940s or something, like the old tube radios. Really like that stuff. But and of course he also DJ'd a lot over throughout the years. So he always made, like, you can find his playlists and stuff on YouTube.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
He would constantly, he was constantly listening to music.
Maybe we can add a link to some of those in our description below this show when we put it out.
So
as far as a guitar player too, the reason I make the Prince comparison is because he never like ceased to amaze me. Because Dave, you saw him, he would tell stories, he would dance around the stage and do all these things, and his guitar would be around his back. But anytime he wanted, he would grab that guitar and swing it around and just hit a note and hold it. And it didn't matter where his hand was on the fretboard. That note was the perfect note every time he hit it.
Wow. So he
wouldn't even look at the fretboard when he hit it.
He's speaking with it. He's a conduit, just like Prince.
So he's just such a natural.
I like your Prince comparison too. A lot of people don't. It's unassuming, right? I feel like, people love Prince because he's this amazing performer and songwriter. And there's a lot of people I feel like I'm dogging people out when I say this, so don't take it too hard. Uh, you know, when you see Prince or someone like Prince and Sylvain in the stories that you're telling here firsthand, is the fact that great songwriter, he can sew, he's got the clothes, he's got cool look, everybody loves him, he's an entertainer. Either Sylvain or Prince here compares. So the thing about that is I feel like there's fans of both of these guys, Prince and Sylvain, and they they don't realize how kick ass of a lead guitar player they are, or a leader of a band type of a thing. They think of them of the songs, they think of the look, but they're not like, oh yeah, and he can play a guitar solo that'll like make you cry.
I think that's especially true with Sylvain because Sylvain was for better or worse, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but he was always in the shadows of David Johansen and Johnny Thunders, and those are pretty long, tall shadows, and I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for being exactly what you just said, Jason. Sort of the songsmith and maybe the driving force, or more of a driving force at least than he gets credit for. Um, and that's what I'm saying. That time I sat in that rehearsal room and watched these guys play, it was just like he was doing exactly that. He was conducting the orchestra, and when you and same thing with Cheetah Chrome. I mean, Cheetah maybe was a little more upfront and had a little more of the spotlight, but he's also, you know, quote unquote competing with Stiv Bators, who's like one of the great frontmen of all time. So uh no easy task to sort of to try and stand out among those guys and let your talent shine through, because you're often being again, quote unquote, upstaged by a character who's even larger than life than you are.
I want to kind of jump in here and like switch the gears a little bit and talk about your regional stuff in Texas and how you got to Texas from Illinois. You're originally from Illinois. Tell us how you couple things. I don't want to load you up. How the hell who started calling you Ginchy? What the hell is that? Because you know that I call you Jason. You realize that I don't really call you Ginchy, but everyone else does. So, and then because Broken Teeth, we went up, you booked us a show at a club you were running in central Illinois, Charleston, Illinois. I can't even remember what year that was. And when were you in Speed Dealer? You used to be REO Speed Dealer. We need to tell those stories again, but give us a little bit of rundown about how you sort of like trickled down to Texas.
Um, well, like I said, I had the club in Illinois in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Good friends.
Friends and Company was one
Friends.
of it. And we had a big room in the back called the Dungeon. And at the time, I was playing in a band called Swamp Ass. That was a three-piece that was doing, something like in between the Heartbreakers and the Humpers. It was straight rock and roll, kind of chaotic punk type thing. The singer of that band, I believe, called me Ginchy at some point. He used to throw weird names out at people, and he threw that one out at me, and it just kind of stuck. So then everybody started calling me that.
Fair enough.
And I couldn't get away from it, so I went with it.
All right.
And we were signed to Reptilian Records in the early 2000s. But that bar that I had, we did live music there, 4 or 5 nights a week, maybe even more. There was absolutely nothing going on in Central Illinois, nothing. But there was a small college campus there. I had the space, so we started doing shows. And I mean, we had a lot of acts in there, some that went on to get much bigger. We had a nice open mic night where that was actually probably our busiest night of the week. Like it it would pack to capacity. You know, people would be signed up. I don't know, it was a great experience for me. But after I got tired of doing that, I guess, is I sold it and shortly after relocated to Texas.
How did you get it was and to be clear, uh speed dealer from Dallas area, Arlington?
Yeah, okay. So Speed Dealer is the interesting thing. I started playing with them because they were on tour and they played at my bar, and I believe they were in between bass players at the time.
Mhm.
Chris Spencer from the band Unsane was supposed to be playing bass with them. Well, when they showed up at my club, he wasn't with them and had gotten left behind in another town, or I don't remember what the story was, but
I hate it when that happens.
right. So they played anyway. They didn't have a bass player, and I was a huge REO. I loved REO Speedler at the time. I was all excited about the show, and then they didn't have bass, and I'm like,
What?
hey, whatever. But after the show, I went up to him. I'm like, man, if you guys need a bass player, just let me know. Like, I'll learn your tunes and come play with you. And they're like, it's all shaking their head, whatever. It was Hardin Harrison, and Jeff and Eric, and
Yeah.
and it wasn't a week and a half later, my phone rings, and it's one of those guys, and they're like, hey, we got some gigs at South by Southwest, but we don't have a bass player. Do you think that you could learn this set and come down? And I'm like, okay, when's the first gig? And they're like, in 4 days.
Holy shit.
And I'm like, Illinois, Texas,
Yeah.
learning 22 songs and getting there and doing them. Okay, I better get off the phone if I'm going to do that.
So let me stop you right there. So that right there is another, I mean, if you're a musician, and this is, I'm working at the School of Rock, right? So I tell stories like this to these kids all the time. If you're going to get a pickup gig, especially if it's someone who you respect and you love, and you might even know a few of their songs already, kind of a thing, that's what you do. And I know Jared, our producer, he did a couple of face-to-face shows or a little leg of a tour. He was learning songs, I don't know, on the plane. He had to
Yeah.
leave before he even picked up a bass, kind of a
Yeah.
thing. So this kind of a thing is very, very normal. The fact that you wanted to do it so badly or bad enough that you would, load your crap up and, burn CDs or whatever of whatever you needed to do to start, just basically plugging into the material as you're driving down there, making mental maps of the songs, right?
Yeah, I went home. I listened to the songs. I charted them all out real quick. May not make sense to someone else, but enough that it made sense to me.
Oh yeah, hieroglyphics. Yeah.
Then I just started playing them. I did that for about 2.5 days straight, rented a car, burned the CD, listened to them all the way down from Illinois to Dallas is where I met them. We went in a rehearsal room, ripped through the set once, took my stuff, put it in their van, and went to Austin. And then the next day played the first show.
Amazing.
Sitting in Austin, I was trying to practice my bass lines, but I think we were at Pincus's house over by Southwest, and it was a little bit loud in there for me to really rehearse. So I did the gig the next day, though. Then we did a couple more, and then they're like, "So hey, you want to do these upcoming tours with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure."
Nice.
And it just kind of went from there.
Nice. I love it. Did you have to really pack up your life back in Illinois? Did you have to sell a house? Did you have to, was there?
No, because at that time I still had the club, and I
Okay.
had a really good manager at the club. So I just told her, like, hey, I got some stuff coming. Well, the thing was too, is I was touring already with my other band, Swamp Ass, and I was also in a doom band called Tumblr that was on like Man's Run Records and Small Stone. It was a doom band. So between those two things, I was always out playing shows anyway. So it wasn't really anything new to the manager when I'm like, hey, I got to cut out for a month to do this tour, And I would be in contact with her from the road, and I still did like the booking of the bands and stuff while I was out. So I was
So
kind
you
of
were,
with that.
yeah, you were busy. You were wearing not only, well, it was a little early. You didn't have Sylvain's hat, but you were wearing many hats.
I was hustling for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Well, and that can be the theme of this entire episode is because, you're a hustler. You've been we've just talked about three, and then in between the three main sort of things we just talked about, and we're not even done. I'm not done talking about Speed Dealer. Uh, you mentioned all these other bands you were in, these labels. You were booking bands. You were booking your band. You probably maybe you weren't booking Speed Dealer yet, but anyway, um, the history of the name Speed Dealer, these guys, for the record, used to be called REO Speed Dealer, which is an awesome spin-off, hilarious, great idea. It's like, for the record, me and Jason, me and Ginchy had for like I don't know, 9 months or so, a year, an Aerosmith tribute called De Niro Smith. Well, that reminds me of REO Speed Dealer in a big way. It's the same sort of take off, right?
Yeah.
Same idea. And anyway, so the story that I heard, and you can fact check this, and this is what I want to talk about. So I heard a story that Kevin Cronin from REO Speedwagon has a son who is a fan of REO Speed Dealer and said, "Hey dad, check these guys out. They're my new favorite band," or whatever, right? And he's like, "Hey, that's not cool. I don't like that. That's mean. They're talking about doing drugs and stuff." And called his lawyer and then put the 86 on that. But you have a different version of that story.
I mean that may have happened to some degree. I've never heard that particular story.
Hmm.
When I ask about the situation, you know, the thing was is we when I went to Europe with Speed Dealer, I asked the guys, I'm like, what's up with your merchandise? You think we should get some more? And then I, started throwing some ideas out there. I'm like, we're going to Europe. Like, can we use the REOs? Can we put the old logos, the REO Speed Dealer? Because that's what everyone wanted. Everyone wanted the REO Speed Dealer merchant, shirts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're going to Europe. Like, can we get away with it over there? So we just did it anyway. But I asked at that time, I'm like, I asked Jeff what the deal was with the name. And what he told me, he just said that when they got signed to Palm Records, that REO Speedwagon's attorney sent a cease and desist order to them.
Yeah.
And Palm didn't want to mess with it.
Right. Okay. The label.
They talked him into dropping the REO.
Right. The label that was supporting REO Speed Dealer didn't want to mess with it.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Right. That's
okay.
And come to think of it, I was saying that Michael Alago was the one who got them their record deal.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one who helped Metallica get their deal with Elektra.
Yeah, he's an attorney / management kind of like he's a go-getter.
You want to know something really funny about Michael Alago, who I've met Michael and spent time with him on many occasions. Michael Alago was the first president of the Dead Boys fan club.
Right.
In 1977.
Oh, there's a full circle right there.
Yeah.
Yes, and there are pictures of him, and I'm not kidding you. When he's with the Dead Boys, he looks like he's about 14.
Yeah. I've seen some of those pictures, and if I'm not mistaken, he also had a hand in the Misfits' early career. There's some connection between him and the Misfits as well.
Yeah. I mean, if you follow his pages and stuff, you'll see pictures of him and Doyle and all.
Yeah.
Misfits, the Pantera guys. I think he might have had a hand in that. I'm not sure.
So
a great documentary.
I was just going to say, I bet there's a lot of Dave. I want you to talk about the documentary. Both of you guys have mentioned the documentary, and I have not seen it or know what it's called. So I want you guys to talk about it. But I was just going to say, and this is very Talk Louder podcast moment when I say, I bet a lot of our listeners or people watching have a stack of records in their collection that have Alago's name on it, and they don't even realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like Ginchy said, he was instrumental in the early part of the Dead Boys' career as far as running their fan club and spreading the word. And you got to remember the Dead Boys were from Cleveland, Ohio, and they made their name in New York City at CBGB. So I mean, somebody was doing some shouting and screaming in order to get them known. And then once they made it to New York, of course they were playing in front of a really the type of crowd that had their ear to the ground and could appreciate them. But the fact that they came out of Cleveland, Ohio, was pretty bizarre, and Alago had something to do with that.
So Alago is from Ohio?
I don't know
Cleveland
where
area?
he's from originally.
Okay.
No, I'm pretty sure he was a New York boy.
I want to say he's
Okay.
a New York East Coast guy too, because he seemed to have a hand in, like I said, I think he had something to do with the Misfits and. But anyway, the documentary that I was alluding to is called "Who the Fuck Is This Guy?" And it's a perfect title because just like you said, Jason, he's one of these guys who's been behind the scenes and on a lot of projects and bands and things that are well known, like worldwide known, super huge and famous. But of course, nobody would know who Michael Alago is because his role has always been kind of behind the scenes as sort of a quiet pitch man.
Yeah,
or whatever.
it's upper management. He's the lawyer on the manager's speed dial when the shit hits the fan, right?
Yeah,
So, I think he was he was A&R for a little bit, right?
Okay,
yeah.
all right, yeah.
Because he also had a hand in White Zombie with White Zombie.
That makes sense.
So
right.
So I always thought for some reason he was a lawyer, but maybe I'm thinking of Peter Paterno. Michael Alago A&R now starts to trickle into my one brain cell as something that I have read in many sort of bio sheets or, the story behind so and so as A&R. That makes total sense now.
And the thing is the beauty of his story is he started off just like all of us. He was a total fan, and he was like, how do I get in the game? I'm not a musician, but I believe in these bands. I want people to know about these bands. I want to promote them in any way I can. And that's sort of how he, got started and got in the game. And
it sounds to me like he's like a poster child for what is the definition of artist relations.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, absolutely. He would come to all our shows in New York. When the Dead Boys would play New York, he was there at every single one of them. And it was really fun. He was so into the music. I remember one night we got off and we had a really good show. And Michael grabs me real intensely. He grabs me. He's like, man, that was better than the original band ever did it. He would just get fired up in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, but for someone that's known the guys that you're, kind of working with, or some of them, whoever is in the room, right? Since he was there in the beginning in the 70s and he's saying that to you, that's huge. That's
for me it was just like validation. It was like, okay, we're doing this right.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. Right. I was going to ask you a little bit about that because let's face it, reviving the Dead Boys and putting them out there on the road and re-recording the record, there's a lot of people that would say, that's sacrilege, man. That's blasphemy. You don't mess with it. You even said yourself, I mean, that record is the Holy Grail. And I saw you guys a few times, and I thought, if you're gonna replace Stiv, Jake did about as good a job as you could ask of anybody. I thought he was great. And so was there a point where you felt like you were sort of turning the tide and winning people over, or was it always an uphill battle where you just were never going to win, but you just made the most of it?
Obviously I knew that there were a lot of people out there that were that were coming from the sacrilege standpoint,
Yeah.
There are probably a lot of fans who wouldn't even go see the revived act, and I don't know. We were just going out there and playing for the people who wanted to see it and giving them as much energy as we could possibly give them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
That's a fine line.
Yeah, and it's not, we've done Talk Louder show, this podcast, we talk about, we had an episode, actually, I should say, where, to tribute band or not to tribute band, right?
Yeah.
The idea of there even being one member or no members in a in a popular group, and we even talked about sometimes there are two of them. So anyway, um some people may have missed the Dead Boys the first time around because they either were not born yet or whatever. So for them to be totally into, the band, the vibe, the lore, and the reason and the celebration, if, as it were, because that's kind of what it is. If you're redoing the classic material, it's a celebration of something too. So you guys provided something for a legion of fans on that side of the fence. The other side of it is that you have the guy who knows telling you, go, Alago coming up to you, giving you the validation. That's huge. All of it.
The band was short lived. I mean, we played almost as long as the original Dead Boys.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a very small window for people to see it. And, anyone under the age of 50 probably didn't see it.
Right. Right. Well, my point was that the Dead Boys are a legendary band, short-lived or not, a blip on the radar as far as that goes. But like I said earlier on, a lot of bands have covered Sonic Reducer. A lot of bands are a lot of people in bands who like that style of rock and roll, dirty punk rock. It was like there's so much you could say about the Dead Boys stylistically. They're not just a punk rock band.
Yeah.
They're kind of metal sometimes, and I don't know.
You want to hear a funny story, Jason?
Yes.
So when we were doing the Aerosmith tribute thing we were doing, I was playing with Cheetah at the time, and we were in the van one night. He's like, oh yeah, so what have you been up to while I was gone? I'm like, I was like, I wonder what Cheetah's going to think of this tribute thing I'm doing.
Yeah, he might think it's super dumb.
Right. So, anyway, so I said, well, I've been playing in a tribute, doing some tribute gigs around town. He's like, oh yeah, who are you doing? I'm like, the early Aerosmith albums. And he just smiles and looks at him in approval and says to me, when the Dead Boys left Cleveland and went to New York, we wanted to be Aerosmith.
That doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all.
That was real validation to me. But there's another level, even with Sylvain and Cheetah, is, a lot of people see those guys as the forefathers of punk rock, of punk rock. You ask either one of those if they're punk rock, and they just laugh.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, no, we're rock and roll.
Yeah.
They're rock and roll, but, to a huge amount of people, they're punk rock.
Well, that's how I feel about the Pistols. And the Pistols were like, you could call them the first boy band because they were put together by a guy who owned a clothing shop. So the idea about the Sex Pistols, never mind the Bullocks, very short-lived band, couldn't sustain, right? That record is a rock and roll record. You like punk rock? It's Sex Pistols. Oh yeah. Well, guess what? If you listen to that record, I mean, Steve Jones is a rock and roll guitar player.
It's like Cheap Trick on speed.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
it's great. It's great. That's a blistering rock and roll record.
Yeah, it's a rock and roll.
You could say the exact same thing about the Ramones, maybe even more so about the Ramones. They're basically just the Beach Boys on speed, And I think the thing is, there wasn't really a term, there wasn't a category called punk rock at the time. It just sort of was created around those bands because, compared to the Emerson, Lake and Palmers and the Led Zeppelins and the Pink Floyd that were hot at the time, they seemed kind of minimalist, and some journalists probably came up with the term punk rock or whatever. But, any of the Ramones would tell you the same thing. Lemmy used to say the same thing about Motorhead. We're not a metal band. We're not a punk rock band. We're a rock and
Right.
roll band.
That's right.
You ask
That's
Joey
right.
Ramone or Johnny Ramone, they're like, no, our influences are the Beach Boys and the Shangri-Las, you know?
Well, you could say you could go AC/DC, same thing. It's like the earliest couple of records of AC/DC and Sounds magazine and all the papers in London and from Australia to Europe, they were calling them punk rock. Is this punk rock? It's kind of the same timing,
Yeah.
75, 76, 77, and it's like they're not punk. That's like punk rock. Okay, that's cool, loud and angry and whatever, but that's a rock and roll. If anything, we're trying to rip off Little Richard,
Yeah.
Chuck Berry, which is the same thing the Rolling Stones were doing. So I always thought that AC/DC was like the Rolling Stones for headbangers.
Yeah.
It's just rock and roll. Like you could say the same thing about Motorhead.
Yeah.
Motorhead has a shimmy shimmy cocoa pop to it, but it's loud as fuck and gargling razor blades with a chainsaw in both hands. So it's just, and that's the disposition of Mr. Kilmister. That's all.
Yeah.
He was born with that, and that's how if he could sing like Paul McCartney, he would have, but he couldn't. He was using what he had. And by God, that is why Motorhead is Motorhead. That's why AC/DC is AC/DC. It's the same. It's the same as it ever was.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So
I want to ask Ginchy, we've talked a lot about the Dead Boys and so
I still have a speed dealer thing I want to ask, but Dave, go.
Okay. We'll come back to Speed Dealer in just a second. I wanted to ask about your collaboration with Bushwick Bill from the Geto Boys. Because I thought that was really cool and definitely, in my opinion, out of left field. Never saw that one coming. But you collaborated with him to some degree, and you had a band called the Bulimics based here in Austin. And so tell the story. He guested on your album, and then you did some shows with him, or how did that work?
Yeah. So I still play with the Bulimics. What happened was the Bulimics were doing a new record, and I don't even know how it came up. It's just one day the singer Jerry walks in. He's like, you guys, I think I'm gonna get Bushwick Bill to do the intro to our album. And we're like, you got to connect and everything. And I had met Bushwick Bill one night. I think it was at Beerland. Was where I met him for the first time. Had a couple conversations with him, but Jerry came in, threw that down. The next thing I know, Bushwick comes over to the studio and lays down the intro for the album. It's spoken word intro to the last record.
Yeah. So, and then did you play some shows with him, or he?
Oh yeah. So, so he's a character. We started talking, and Bushwick is all over the map, man. He liked punk rock. He liked rock. Like, he wasn't just like a rap guy at all. He was, obviously, that's what he's known for.
Yeah.
But he was a music guy. He just loved music, But he listened to some of the songs we were doing. And he's like, oh yeah, he was liking, he was feeling it. And then I asked him, I'm like, why don't you do a rock show? You want to come play with the Bulimics or something? And the Bulimics didn't have any gigs at the time. And I'm like, hey, I'll tell you what. I got Sylvain Sylvain coming back to town from the New York Dolls, which caught his attention. And I'm like, what if you opened up for Sylvain Sylvain? And he's like, well, what am I going to do? And I'm like, I'll tell you what, I'll put a band together for you. We'll play the Geto Boys tunes, and you can get up there and do your thing.
Like rock versions, basically?
No. Well, there was guitar. I played guitar over it.
That's kind
we had a bass player. Some of it was, we rocked it up a little bit, but we also had we brought in a guy to do samples and stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, made it a little bit more legit.
Yeah, it was cool. Like, you heard the samples that were in the Geto Boys songs while we were playing them and stuff, But he was doing it with a live band, which was really interesting, really fun. But he had so much fun doing that. I remember he was like, what else can we do for South by? I'm like, man, it's Tuesday. South by is right now until the end of the week. I don't know that we're going to book any shows. But Sylvain was like, hey, you know what you should do? You should come out with us. We're playing over at Hotel Vegas in the backyard, and maybe you can get up and do some impromptu jams with us. So we're going out and doing Sylvain shows, and Bushwick Bill's crashing at my house, and so's Sylvain. And we're getting up and we're going and doing shows. And during the middle of the Sylvain set, I think we would break down Pills by the New York Dolls, and Bushwick would jump up on stage and start,
freestyling.
Just
freestyling it on stage. Yeah. And people would eat that shit up.
Of course.
So people were going crazy. They're like, their minds were blown.
Yeah. Well, that's let me be the first to, well, surely not the first to say that right there is like, well, first it's rock history, and the world didn't get to see that. It happened in Texas, right?
Yeah.
So that's huge in my small brain, my one brain cell. That is massive. The fact that you've got Sylvain Sylvain and Bushwick Bill, did you just throw the Ghetto Dolls?
That's what we were calling it.
Really? I just sorry, I didn't, I'm not a magician. That was just obviously in my head, right?
The Ghetto Dolls.
Bushwick's been notorious over the years at South by for just showing up and hopping up on stage with people. But like I said, he would stay over at my house a couple nights, and I think he ended up doing 8 shows with us over that South by, because when we were doing that South by with Sylvain, I think we had like 9 or 10 shows booked. Like we were bang, 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 bang.
Right.
But yeah, Bushwick was riding along. Hell, even when I couldn't find him and didn't think he was going to show up, sure enough, we'd get into Pills and I'd look over and he'd be standing on the side of the stage.
Waiting, ready to go. Like a bullet in a gun.
I can't get the I've got an image in my head of Bushwick and Sylvain over at your house, and I'm thinking, man, that's one hell of a slumber party right there. Bushwick Bill.
That was a pretty good one. I think I only have had one other slumber party at my house that topped that one.
Well, you got
I know what you're gonna say.
I had
talking about Bobby.
I had Cheetah Chrome, Johnny Blitz, and Bobby Liebling from Pentagram at my house.
Yeah, I knew
for a week.
Holy shit.
For a week.
And your house is still standing. I can attest to that because I've been there since, but I don't know how.
Yeah, but his homeowner's insurance went up, surely.
Yeah. And the neighbors all moved out.
There was one incident.
Do you still have grass growing out front?
There was one incident. I came home. I was out doing something. I come home and I walk in, and Johnny Blitz, they've been drinking since 7 a.m, I'm sure. And Johnny's just kind of like, yeah, hey, I think Bobby had a problem in the bathroom with something upstairs. I don't know. And just kind of walked away. And I didn't think anything of it. And then I walked in the kitchen, and Cheetah's standing there. And all of a sudden, Cheetah's like, what the hell? And water had dripped down on his bald head. And when I looked up, there was water coming through the ceiling, where apparently Bobby had backed up one of the toilets upstairs or something, and like basically flooded the whole upstairs.
Left it running, yeah.
Yeah, it just...
He wanted to go swimming upstairs. I get it.
Oh, yeah, and I go up there. I'm like, hey, Bobby, what's going on up here? You need some help? He's like, there's a million towels laying everywhere. He's like, yeah, I don't know what to do, blah, blah, whatever. He takes off, and I sit there and clean this mess up for 2 hours, and then come back down, and they're out on the back patio drinking beer, carrying on.
Yeah.
Nothing happened, nothing to see here.
He doesn't realize that little intake valve down close to the floor underneath the bowl, you just turn it to the right.
Yeah.
It might have made sense, early on in the game, but I'm pretty sure he was probably a 12. again at that point.
Blown out, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
But that was a wild one.
Yeah.
I bet
like
it sounds wackadoo.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick. So, what is there any truth behind this? Goes back to Speed Dealer a little bit, and you can clear this up. I don't know if you were working with Speed Dealer at this time or not. I'm gonna guess not. I'm sorry. I'm stream of consciousness here. Did the members of Speed Dealer, or the leftover members, I should say, have a band called Mitra or Mitra or something like that?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Eric and Arden.
Yeah, they were awesome.
Yeah.
Who was that singer they had? You remember him? He's a big old guy.
Kurt. His name was Kurt.
Mitra was awesome. I think I have a CD somewhere. Anyway, I saw them during South by. I think they played at the record store I was working at for a while. So, is there any truth to the connection of?
No, you know where Mitra played, Jason?
Where?
Was when I did that show at Shakespeare's. Remember when I booked a show at Shakespeare's, and it was New Disaster, Broken Teeth, Iron Head,
that's right.
Bible of the Devil.
Yeah.
Mitra was the first band that played that day.
That's right. But I think that a couple days prior or the day before or something, they played at Encore Records.
Oh, wow.
Because I remember that because I had to work.
Yeah.
So
it was like 2006.
I think I ran sound for him. That's the right time. So anyway, Mitra was great. Speed Dealer was a great band, and with legendary people in the band, at least around here.
Oh, yeah.
So what Harden? Are we talking rigor mortis Harden?
Harden Harrison from Rigor Mortis, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Let's put our hands together for that.
Dude, getting to play with him on a stage every night was awesome.
So that's a huge. Okay, so Harden, rigor mortis, Mitra, Speed Dealer. Enough said. Here's where I'm trying to get to, and this is sort of like this is kind of like a rumor. I don't want to call it a rumor, but didn't Jason Newsted produce a demo or a record by Speed Dealer? What's the story?
That's right, and that relates back to Michael Alago.
Yes, it does. Okay, tell that whole story about how Alago, Jason Newsted, Speed Dealer, Newsted comes to Dallas, produces a record.
Man, you know what? I thought that they went out to Walnut Creek to do that album.
Oh, really? They went out to Jason's house.
I think so. You know what? I didn't play on that album. That was right before I got in the band.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think. I'm not sure who played on that album. If it might have been Casey Orr from
Rigor
Mortis. I know he was in the band one time. I don't know if he did that record. It may have been the other guy, Rodney was his name, the bass player before him. But yeah, I mean, from what I understand, and I think I'm kind of pretty accurate on this, is Alago got them signed to Palm or whatever, and then hooked up that Newsted producing them. Because I remember Jeff telling me that whenever they got signed, the label was really bent on their sound, the sound. And there was a little bit of confusion. Like the label perceived them as more of a metal band. And that's what they had in mind for them. When if you listen to all their other stuff, there's a little bit of metal crossover, but they're definitely a punk band. And whenever they made that album, I think a lot of their fans were a little put off by it because it was pretty polished and, not quite the punk records as before. And I heard the demos for that record, and the demos for that record sound different. They sound like the old style, but the record that came out on Palm, they kind of missed the mark with that band,
Okay.
And
and then what was it? Am I to understand that what was the last thing that that the band did, just after that record? They didn't have a bass player. They got you did the Texas stuff. Did you after that kind of fizzled, or what was not as busy, did you go back to Illinois?
Yeah, I mean, I was basically flying down. My sister lives in Dallas. So I would come down and I would stay with her or whatever. And then we would go tour or whatever. And we did some tours with Zeke back at that time after they released the Bleed record. And I think it just kind of fizzled out at that point. You know,
Okay.
Jeff went back to school, I'm pretty sure. The singer and founder of the band.
Did you end up packing it up here and going back to Illinois and getting your shit?
Yeah, I mean, after the last tour, you know, after the tours were over, I'd always go up to Illinois, which is where I had the house and the club at the time, and it, you know, once the bar, I got tired of the bar, decided I needed a change, and I had been traveling to Austin for years. I mean, my old band Swamp Ass played at South by Southwest in the late '90s or early 2000s, whatever. And I'd come down for South by, you know, almost every year, regardless of whether I was playing or not.
You did some some promotions for Broken Teeth. Do you remember that?
That would have been in 2004.
Yeah, was that like Kill City?
I was doing Kill City PR at the time, because I was working so much with so many bands, and you know, I would be talking to their agents and I'm like, who's doing PR for this tour? And they'd all be like, oh yeah, there's no PR. And I'd be like,
what?
What? And then I'd talk to the band. I'm like, you guys don't have a publicist working for you, promoting your record or doing anything like that? So I can't even remember. I think it was Nate Arlen who was in the Las Vegas, who worked at the Double Door.
Right.
I was talking to him and he's like, man, you should just, you know, you got all the connects. You should start doing PR for people. And I had experience in writing and promoting and things like that. And I knew all the outlets anyway, because I would send stuff out for my own band. So I had all the rock, you know, I had the Rolodex of the rock writers and all the publications all over the country. So I started doing that for a while. You know, I probably did that for a couple of years.
No, I remember it well, and I do feel like a lot of people got to see and hear, you know, Broken Teeth because of you. So hey, thanks, dude.
Yeah, it's just like it's, you know how it is. You get the music in the right people's hands.
Yeah,
Yeah.
15
You learn
years
to know who the right people are.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the Jason Newsted story. So, and that was a little bit about how you needed a change. You were coming to Austin frequently.
Oh yeah, so I ended up just straight up moving to Austin.
Okay.
And I lived here for about 5 or 6 months, and
Santa Cruz.
yeah, it's okay. So I was here for about 5 or 6 months, and I got a call from the band Ironhead in Virginia, and they're like, hey, do you want to do a month with us on tour playing second guitar? And I was like, sure, let me learn the songs. And then went and did a tour with them, met a girl in Santa Cruz, and decided I wanted to move back to Santa Cruz. So I went out there and spent, I don't remember, 7 or 8 years out there. And then I, you know, just decided that I would never be able to afford a house in California.
Ouch.
Came back to Austin.
Yeah.
Bought a house. I've been
Yeah.
here ever since.
Yeah. Wasn't it your anniversary recently?
Yeah, just yesterday, I think.
Yesterday was my anniversary. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this show is gonna, you know, we'll upload it later on, but fuck it. Happy anniversary.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
It's
How
been-
many years?
This is our second year marriage. It's been great so far.
So
Excellent.
Ginchy, tell people, I know this because I know you, but this is a great story. Tell people where you spent your honeymoon. This is fantastic.
First of all,
I don't know, though, so I don't know. So Virgin Ears here. So
This is good.
First of all, let me say that I think I met my wife, Dave, I met my wife at a Dead Boys show at Hotel Vegas. Did you go to that show with me?
I did see a Dead Boys show at Hotel Vegas.
Didn't I pick you up in my 65 Merc?
Oh my God, that's right. And it died on the way home, right?
On the way home, it overheated at like 4 a.m.
That's right.
So rock and roll.
Yeah, man.
No. Okay, so that night, I picked you up at your house and we went to the show, the Dead Boys show.
Right.
It was the night that I met my wife.
Oh, wow.
She didn't even mean to go there, and she wasn't a Dead Boys fan. She went with a friend.
And she married you anyway.
Right.
So
Love it.
yeah, that was great. It was like we had a full-on kick-ass time at the rock show with the Dead Boys, and we're driving this, what is that? It was like some 65 muscle car or something. And
yeah, it's my 65 Mercury.
65 Mercury. We're coming home 4 a.m. The friggin' thing dies on the side of the road. We're like, oh my God, just kill me now. And I think Wendy Wad came and picked us up or something.
Well, that's when we were on our way to drop Wendy off at her house.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I knew she was in the picture.
And my friends Ron and Jamie were in the back seat because you can fit about 12 people in that car.
So
It's like a van.
So tell people where you spent your honeymoon, because this is a great story.
Okay, so we didn't want to do a full-on wedding, so we went to New Orleans to get married, and we got married in the French Quarter Chapel, which it was super awesome. But when we stayed down there for our wedding, we stayed in room number 7 at St. Peter's Hotel. And room number 7 actually, back in the day, used to be room number 37, which is the room that Johnny Thunders died in.
Okay, I knew as soon as you started to load up the New Orleans facts, I knew there was a story that was relating to our entire episode.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Wow.
he spends his honeymoon night in the hotel room where Johnny Thunders died. I mean, if that doesn't make that girl a keeper, I don't know what will.
She played along. She loved it.
She put up with you in the broken down car at 4 a.m. She was willing to spend her wedding night in the room that Johnny Thunders died. I'd say, I'd say you did pretty good there, buddy.
Well, she's not afraid of ghosts.
Yeah,
She's not afraid to. It's not a deal breaker if your old cool car kind of sucks too.
Working on it.
Sure. But that's like a dirt sandwich. No, it's good, honey. It's good. Thanks for making me lunch. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good on you, bro.
Yeah, that's good stuff right there. The funny thing is, Ginchy was on tour with the Dead Boys, and I remember he went to the hotel room where Johnny Thunders died. He took a photo outside of the front door and he posted it on Facebook. And, as he said early in the episode, he's a huge Johnny Thunders fan, yada, yada. And I was like, so about a year later, me and my wife were going to New Orleans. And I started picking his brain and said, where's that hotel? I want to go to the Johnny Thunders room. And I go there. And when I get there, I walked up to the front desk and I told this woman that was working there, basically the innkeeper, if you will, or the head of the maids or whatever. She must have been the innkeeper. I'll never forget. Her name was Miss Carol. And she said, I asked her for the room and she says, oh, you want to go to the Johnny Thunders room? And she said, well, we're in between guests and the maids are cleaning up the room. You could probably, she goes, follow me. So we follow her and we go in, we actually get into the room. And she says, our next guest isn't checking in for another hour. Take your time. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, can we take pictures? And she says, sure, do whatever you want. Just, take your time.
Don't mess up the bed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm in there, me and Kim are in the same room. And so we're taking pictures. So then I send the pictures to Ginchy and I said, hey man, I was kind of one-upping him, right? Because it's like, okay, a year ago, you were standing outside the front door taking this picture. I'm in the room. And then about a year later, he spends his honeymoon in the room, sleeps there overnight. And it was like, damn you, man.
Well, it's kind of always been a game of one-upping each other with you and me, with the record autographs and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted I wanted you to tell that story because it's such an awesome story, and I'm glad Jason brought up your anniversary because all this kind of blossomed out of that story.
Well, and this is the kind of stuff. I haven't said this yet. Jason is a perfect guest for Talk Louder podcast because of all of the stories and the elbows you've gotten to rub with, the songs that you've gotten to play, the songs that you got to even witness being written. I mean, watching Sylvain make clothes in your house. All the way down to Bobby from Pentagram destroying your upstairs. All worthy of rock talk on Talk Louder.
Because we have high standards, and
That's right.
That's good stuff, man. That's good stuff.
Whether they're high or low standards, those are the standards that we have, and that was just underlining them all, saying, Jason, you are welcome on Talk Louder because you fucking rock.
Yeah, man, I wanted to thank you for being here, but we're not done yet. As you know, we always finish up each episode with a segment called Shot of Rock and Roll. So let's move into it. Our Shot of Rock and Roll. And my Shot of Rock and Roll to our special guest, Jason Kottwitz, a.k.a. Ginchy, today. We spent a lot of time talking about punk rock and your travels with some punk rock legends. I wanted to know, switching gears a little bit, what is your favorite, for lack of a better term, hair metal album? He's speechless.
Hair metal.
Yeah, what is hair metal, Dave? So
he knows what I'm talking about.
I know. Everybody knows what he's talking, but I have to be the asshole.
Tick tock, tick.
Well, man, that's tough because some of the bands that some people consider hair metal, I don't really consider them hair metal.
Aha.
They're just rock and rollers with nice looking hair,
That's why I love you, Jason.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's a handful of bands that are considered by the mainstream to be hair metal bands, but I don't consider them hair metal. And maybe I'll name one or two of those in a minute, but it's hard to pick one in that genre because I was so young and influential at that time, and I listened to, all of those bands. Man, I mean, the Dangerous Toys debut album's as good as any, right? But do you want to be called hair metal, Jason?
No, because we're not.
Yes,
that's what I'm saying.
I owe you a coat, bro.
Okay, so if I had to pick one hair metal band, I would say.
I think you answered it correct. Let's move on.
The first Faster Pussycat, I love that record. I love
there you go
records. I love DAD.
Yeah, there you go.
Dangerous Toys. Hanoi Rocks. I mean, I don't know.
There you go.
There.
Yeah.
All right.
All of that. You just drew like a circle where, to me, you can relate all of that attitude and style, and yet still kind of like be able to like squint. And some people would think that all of those bands are hair metal bands, whether you think they are or not.
Right. I mean, to me, there's not a lot of difference between the Dead Boys and Faster Pussycat.
I can see that. I agree.
And there's not a lot of difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different eras, cool. Very similar rock and roll sounds.
Yep. Very cool.
Fair enough. There you go.
Yeah.
And by the way, I only use the term hair metal to cut to the chase. You guys know me better than that.
Yeah, I know, but it always opens a really interesting can of worms when you bring someone else in that's not you or me, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ginchy just, went
He
all in, which is,
he reacted exactly at how I do. His he felt like someone like threw a rock at him when you asked
yeah.
him.
Who else has one? Anybody else got one?
I got one for you, Dave.
All right, shoot.
In your time interviewing so many different bands and so many different band members, whatever, what is the one time that sticks out to you where you were almost stunned and caught off guard by an answer that you got?
That's a good one, man.
Oh man.
I mean, is there anything where you ask a question and you were just completely shocked by the answer you got back?
Like a what the?
That's a good question.
A WTF moment, yes.
I remember doing an interview one time with Tom Araya from Slayer, and I asked him if we could peek through your record collection, what would we find that would be, kind of left field that we wouldn't expect from Tom, the singer from Slayer. And he was practically jumping up and down. We were on the phone, but he got real excited to tell me that he's a huge fan of the Gypsy Kings, which I thought was pretty cool. And you got to remember, he was born in Chile. He comes from he's been influenced by Latin music all his life throughout his childhood or whatever. So if you think about it, it's really not that far of a stretch. But I would bet most of his audience, he's the demon from Slayer. They wouldn't expect him to be listening to Gypsy Kings on his day off. So maybe that's a little more along the lines of what you're looking for.
That's pretty cool.
Tom Araya's brother stayed at my house for about a week a couple months ago.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah, I remember you mentioned something about that, and I was like, wait a minute, is that the guy from Blood Cum?
Yes, that's exactly who it was, John.
Isn't his name John? Yeah. How do you know him?
He's dating a friend of mine
Here in town.
She was here in town. She's recently moved to San Antonio, but
right.
Yeah, she was here, and he came here. He was here for about a week. That was a lot of fun. I got to, get my Slayer fix in.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah,
my
that's cool.
Slayer knowledge game a little.
I met him so long ago, and we talked about Bloodcom, and I think that their first record was on Wild Rags. Do you guys remember something called Wild Rags? Anyway, that's a whole other episode. But anyway, yeah, that's awesome. That's freaking awesome. I think John like guitar teched for some bands for a while.
Yeah, he techs for a lot. He did those Misfits tours, I think, and the most recent ones, and he's teched for Slayer since the beginning.
Right.
So yeah, he's been, when he's not out with them, he was out with other people.
Right.
I'm starting to get the feeling that Ginchy's house is like the coolest rock and roll hotel in certainly in Austin, maybe in all of Texas or
Bill,
the country.
I agree with you, Dave. It almost sounds like Jason has continued an actual tradition, because when you think about the history of Austin, Texas, and I mean the hippies were here, flocking here before our parents were. My parents were not hippies, right? So
yeah, mine either.
Right. See what I mean? So that there was a lot of ragtag and hanging out and people just camping on sofa surfing, if you will, in a town like Austin in the 60s. That was happening, and it was like the place to be. And Austin was not cluttered at all. It was a small-ish college town. Barton Springs would get a little busy on the weekends. Hell, every day probably, with the hippies that I'm talking about. And I've always thought there'd be something in the water for artists, for musicians, and the like. And I just think that Ginchy, that Jason is one. Obviously, his house has some kind of like, maybe it's built on some kind of Indian burial ground. I don't know.
I let a couple people stay here, and that kind of opened the floodgates for it all.
That's super old school. You know, we're going to have an episode about fanzines and the origin and the ideas behind the fanzines, which in my to my knowledge, they were started by the punk bands. So they would have lists of everyone's phone numbers and addresses of crash pads for when Black Flag would come through town.
Yeah.
They look up in some like dirty fanzine that's all Xeroxed and stapled together. Hey, let's call this guy, you know. And then that was just how that kind of thing. But it's not any different than the hippies. And I also have a theory that a lot of early punk rock bands, their parents were hippies.
So I got a question for you, Jason.
Okay.
And I don't know if you remember, a few minutes ago when I mentioned Sylvain Sylvain calling me on the phone, and the feeling that I had where, boy, that was a great moment for me and really, really a huge high for me.
Mm-hmm.
When in your career as a musician did you ever feel that high and you felt like you were on top of the world and it was just a real peak moment for you?
There's been quite a few one I feel like I may have elaborated on just or not elaborated on, but maybe mentioned in passing. So the toys are done with the second record for Columbia. We're rehearsing, getting ready for some club shows or something, and it's early 91 or something, and the phone rings and it's management and they're going, so I got you a tour, make sure you write this down. So you're going on tour with Alice Cooper, Judas Priest, Motorhead, and Metal Church, and here's the first date. It starts in Salt Lake City. I'm like, stop talking for a sec. Can you say that again? So all in one like vomitous sentence, my manager tells me that I'm going on tour with almost, about 80% of my idols. So that was kind of a one of those like, what I get to do what? So yeah, I mean, getting to see Alice and Priest, like, did I just say Allison Priest? That's sure. I bet there's someone with that name as a real name. Anyway,
Sounds like a Hollywood actress.
yeah, it does. For 6 or 7 weeks, I got to see that every night. Unbelievable.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
That
unbelievable.
almost. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, and Alice was, still doing, the show. His show is always great. I think that the Hey Stupid record is not my favorite Alice Cooper record, but Priest was still milking Painkiller, and it was right before Halford was, would come to knowledge now, quit the band for a little while, go solo for a second. If
Did you say Metal Church was also on that tour?
Metal Church was on before the Toys, and then Motorhead, and then Alice and Priest would flip-flop headliner according to market. And the crazy thing is that there were, first off, we're nothing like any of those. I mean, Metal Church is kind of a little bit like Motorhead by way that, metal fans who like who like Metal Church can like Motorhead, but here's this like kind of boogie, dirty Aerosmith. The Toys were ripped off, get a blender, throw Aerosmith, ZZ Top, Fog Hat, and I don't know, the first Rat EP. You know what I mean? And put it on Crush. And that's what we are. On one side of the coin, we didn't fit at all. And the other side of the coin, who gives a shit? Because we were getting to do something that a lot of other bands from, shall I just lump us all together, in the class of 89, Bang Tango. They didn't call Bang Tango. See my point? We were well. It was what it was. It was. I feel like Sony, Columbia, Epic, Columbia are under the Sony umbrella. They were about to clean house because it was summer '91 and shit wasn't going really good for metal. Anything that just was close to metal. It was more of a Seattle world at that
Mhm.
point.
Yeah.
So I guess they were kind of cleaning house. We didn't care. We were not. It wasn't on our to-do list to change our wardrobe and the sound of the band just because the dollar bill was blowing somewhere else. We were happy to go out there, pass or fail. But being sandwiched between Metal Church and Motorhead was a lot of work. I think we played our songs too fast on purpose.
Uh-huh.
I think that we headbanged a lot more. We ran around, we tried to stay, I think I ran around more just so I wouldn't get pelted with quarters and lighters. But it was, you know what? No regrets. It was freaking awesome. And that was a great moment that made me feel like I had made some decent choices in my life. And there's a few more, but that's probably good. That's a big enough one to answer your question. Good question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the way that that kind of brings the show full circle. Jason got to go out on tour with some of his heroes, and Ginchy got to spend some time actually on stage playing with his heroes, and that's really cool. You guys have both done some pretty incredible
The
things.
the
So
the closest thing to like Ginchy's story is about, I mean, Lemmy wasn't staying at my house, but we spent more time. We spent
if
more
he
time.
did, your lawn would die.
Yeah, that's right. We spent more time with the Motorhead guys than we did anybody else.
Of course.
The guys in Alice Cooper's band, which was at the time it was Eric Singer and Greg Smith and um, Vinnie Moore. It was all these bad motherfuckers. And they would come out and watch our sound check almost every day. Dude, play that one song. Da, 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 da. Oh, I love this one. It's
Yeah.
like normal people. And it was that rules, right? And then, but as soon as the guys in Motorhead would like wake up at 5 p.m., we'd run into them, or sometimes they would just be coming into our dressing room. You got any beers? I'd be like, whatever you want, bro.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
I have some video of Lemmy wearing his Daisy Dukes, nothing else,
I've seen.
and Wurzel with like a cocktail, like like whiskey on ice is what it looked like. It wasn't like a big beer or anything. It was, some kind of, it was a dirty glass kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Lemmy curling his toes up like this, kind of, that'll tell you state of mind, right? And picking up Danny's guitar. And I said, play Leaving Here. He starts playing Leaving Here.
I've seen that.
And I'm like, turn on the video camera right now. And so I think Mark turned on the video camera and Danny picks up the harmonica and I'm beating on the road case.
Yeah.
And we're doing a terrible impromptu ready, go, version of Leaving Here. And Lemmy wasn't that great of a guitar player. That's why he played the bass through like amps up to the ceiling, just because it would just roar. But yeah.
Yeah.
He plays guitar like he plays bass. So he was just trying to make a guitar like his bass. So, and I learned that quick. As soon as he started playing, I'm like, oh, damn, he's a bass player. So, and I love Lemmy's bass playing. So,
Yeah.
Anyway,
Nice.
Jason, thank you for being here. We're getting down to the nitty gritty. I just want to say thank you for
Yes, indeed. A lot of great stories. I knew you'd have a lot to tell us and a lot to share. So thank you for being so gracious with your time and your memories. Real quick, Ginchy, tell people where they can get a hold of you, where they can follow you, find you, etc.
Best way they can get a hold of me is I would suggest sending a friend request to my Facebook page, which is just my name, or I can always be reached by email at jasonkottwitz@gmail.com. Those are the best outlets. I'm also on some of the other social networking platforms. Just look around and add me, send me a message, whatever.
Fair enough. Thank you again for being with us today, ladies and gentlemen. Jason Ginchy Kottwitz, our special guest on this episode of Talk Louder. I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with my co-host Jason McMaster, signing off this time. We'll see you next time on the Talk Louder podcast.